I see
You
Eli
know,
Ayala is here. I've never seen you come around these parts. What explains that, Eli?
Oh, I have three little kids, and so I'm normally not available. So late at night when I'm by myself, every now and then I'll pop in and give a listen to what people are talking about.
I
So,
don't think I've ever seen you come into a room that like most of these atheists are in. I've only seen you in
well,
like a Darth room or
yeah,
Darth Associates room.
I'm kind of new to Clubhouse, so when I pop in, I'm connected with rooms of people that I know from Discord. So I happen to see Matt here, and I know when Matt's around, the conversations are pretty interesting. So I just popped in. That's all.
Yeah,
well,
Matt
welcome.
Adams and I tomorrow are going to be debating on the problem of evil, and we're going to start doing debates regularly. Would you be interested in debating?
Uh, maybe, maybe not. I usually like to prepare for. I don't do a lot of like informal, organized debates because I like to prep, and I normally don't have time to prep. So I've turned down a number of debates that have been offered over the past couple of months. So I
Well,
like
it
having
doesn't have to
discussions
be.
and stuff, but not necessarily like, hey, tomorrow we're going to debate topic, fill in the blank. I don't
You
typically
don't have
do
to
that.
be a like big production or anything. You can. We'd be happy to have a discussion.
Well, I suppose if I'm in a room and someone wants to ask questions or talk about a topic, I suppose I'm down to have a conversation. I can't plan ahead of time, so tonight that I'm on it, I didn't know I was going to be on it. I never really know when I'm going to be on because I kind of run with the flow of my family and having three little kids and other responsibilities. So I try to hop on when I have the time. So I can't commit to
Okay.
being on at a specific time. So if you guys were like, hey, tomorrow we're going to talk about A, B, and C at such and such a time, I couldn't guarantee that I'd be able to do that. I just kind of hop on when I have the time.
Cool.
Does that make
Fair
sense?
enough. But I gotta ask you one question while you're in here. You know what it is,
Sure.
right?
I have no
You know
idea.
what it is. You know it's coming, right?
I have no idea.
The Christian
What?
God exists because
Uh,
Okay. Can I just
the
make
Christian God
one?
exists because the Christian God exists because.
you
Hey,
got to
Tom,
say it
did you
five more
state
times.
challenge?
Hey Eli, I'm Hayley. I don't think we've met.
Hello.
No, I'm
Hi.
serious. I want an
I know.
answer.
I was about to ask him to answer the question. I'm just kidding. But would you like to?
Uh, the question you just asked, I thought you were doing an impression of Darth Dawkins. I didn't know you were asking a serious question.
Well, he
Well,
doesn't ask that question.
that's what
Oh,
makes
I
it
think I've
fun.
heard him say it in some context. The Christian God exists because, or
No,
someone's
he says
asking
God
that
does
question,
not
I
exist
guess.
because.
Oh, I see. I see. Yeah. Well, to be perfectly honest, I think that God exists because He's revealed Himself. So He's revealed Himself such that we could know that He exists. That's a simple answer to it. To which
You
you
know, I
then
was talking. Sorry, go ahead.
to which then someone could respond, well, how do we know He's revealed Himself? I know we're off running into a broader discussion, but simple
Oh
answer,
no,
look
that's
it
the
up.
wrong question. That's going too fast. You know, I had this. This was brought up just a couple days ago with Veckel, right?
Okay, I don't know who that
And
is.
what do you mean by reveal?
What do you mean by reveal? Well, to reveal
Yeah.
something is to uncover something or to bring to someone's attention something that would have otherwise been unknown. So God has revealed Himself both in general and special revelation, and
Okay, let's talk about.
I would say that
So,
those would
general
be,
revelation would be something like flower, right?
well, the created order.
Right. Flower would be
Sure.
one amongst the set of created orders,
The
correct?
flowers, the trees, the birds, and the bees. Yep.
Okay, so you see a flower, and then conclusion, therefore, the Christian God. Can you fill
Nope.
in the blank?
Yeah. So that scenario there actually presupposes that knowledge of God is mediate, so that it's mediated through what we observe, and then we come to a conclusion. Within the Christian worldview, the knowledge of God is both mediate, we look and see, but it's also immediate, that we have an immediate knowledge of God, given that we ourselves as human beings are an aspect of God's revelation. So I would say
So you have
that
innate knowledge, right?
innate knowledge, that's correct. Hmm.
Gotcha. So let's just bracket that the innate knowledge. Let's talk about the knowledge, the other type of knowledge, right? Where you see
Okay.
the flower, something,
Sure.
something, something, therefore Christian God. Can you walk me through that?
Well, I don't say therefore Christian God. So I would say that if we have a knowledge of God, then God is not a conclusion to a line of reasoning. He's the necessary prerequisite for any reasoning whatsoever. And that's where you get the whole transcendental aspect of this sort of discussion. And
No, but I thought,
that comes hand in hand with the concept of innate knowledge. So I wouldn't give a transcendental argument for God if I didn't believe knowledge of God was also innate.
okay, but I thought I said let's bracket innate knowledge, and then I asked you about the flower, which is the not innate knowledge, and
Well, I
then when
can't.
you answered that,
Yeah,
you talked about innate knowledge.
sure.
But
Well, I can't. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I want to talk about the general revelation of a flower.
Well, I wouldn't bracket them because I think they go hand in hand. So without the innate knowledge, I would argue that one would lack the necessary preconditions to make sense out of the revelatory nature of a flower.
Isn't innate knowledge special revelation?
And I think I wouldn't know exactly. I'd have to think about how we would divvy that up. But I would say that natural revelation, general revelation, pertains to the knowledge that revelation that all men have. And so I would say that the fact that we are image bearers of God is general revelation. But of course, because God reveals himself more, it can kind of touch on the areas of special revelation.
Okay, well that's what I want to know about. Well,
Okay.
well, the general revelation, right? So it seems
Okay.
like when you say you look at a flower, you just innately know that, therefore, Christian God.
No, I would say that we know that God exists prior to looking at a flower. So if you were to pluck my eyes out, I still have a knowledge of God. It's not based upon what I observe. That which what I observe is a part of the revelation, but it's not the thing I look at and then conclude, therefore.
Right. So, in what sense does the flower reveal God then?
Well, number one, our very capacity to interpret flower presupposes categories that I would say require a knowledge of God. And the very nature of the thing itself gives evidence of a creator. Take that coupled with our innate knowledge of God, that
Oh, there we go.
constitutes a
Gives
form of
evidence of a
revelation.
creator. That's some kind of inference, right?
Yes, and the knowledge of God is both inferential and innate.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the inferential part.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk me through that?
All right, what would you like to know?
The inference where you go from flower to God exists.
Well, again, I'm not going to bracket innate knowledge because I think it's a necessary prerequisite. So I don't know how to talk about a flower independent of the innate knowledge that we have, since it's a necessary precondition to see the
Yeah, you could.
flower as an extended revelation of God in the external sense.
I know how. You could tell me what the inference is.
I don't know what you're talking about. In terms of the innate context, the intellectual context necessary to interpret a flower, the inference is both we have a knowledge of God, and when we look at the created order, we see evidence of we see further evidence of the God that we innately know.
Right. What's that evidence?
What do you mean? What's that evidence? The flower is evidence of the maker. I can give an
You
argument
said
to
you
say,
look at the flower and you have innate knowledge, and we see
no.
evidential.
We don't look at the flower and then we have innate knowledge. We have innate knowledge in light of the fact that we're image bearers of God. So
Right, but you say
you
that
have innate
also
knowledge of God. You have innate knowledge of God, and so there's evidence of God within us, and there's evidence of God without us, and they work together. I cannot make sense out of the one without already having the knowledge of God innately. So I can't
right, and
separate them.
I'm asking about. You said we have evidence within us, and we have evidence without us. What is the
Right.
evidence without us? Flower, therefore God.
I can't talk about the evidence without us without already talking about the evidence within us. They both go hand in hand. Once I
Well,
separate
then
them and
there.
talk about one without the other, then I've cut off the link that provides the necessary preconditions for properly interpreting external reality.
Okay, so you look at a flower, you have innate knowledge that, therefore God.
That the maker has made the flower. The maker that I know innately has made that flower. Yeah.
Right. Okay, granted, whatever. But what's the evidence part? Because we're looking at an
Well, again, it's
inference. You were
evidence. Evidence. If you're talking about evidence and you want me to walk you through understanding how a flower is evidence, I can't do that independent of a framework. and that framework includes my innate knowledge of God. So I can't.
Okay, so you have innate knowledge of God.
You're
Okay, I'm granting that.
right, but you're creatively asking a question in a creative way that would actually force me to answer it as though a flower can be understood independent of the framework that I'm working in, and I would say that's impossible. So
Well, I'm granting the
understanding what.
framework. You look at the
Okay.
flower, you already know that it's God, but then you say, apart from the innate knowledge that you have, it's also outside of your innate knowledge. It's like, these are your words, right?
Sure.
And you made this distinction, right? There is that flower is evidence for God apart from your innate knowledge. Now, I can grant you have innate knowledge that the flower points to God. I'm asking you
It's not it's
for
not independent of the innate.
fine.
You
Just explain the other half. That's not the innate part.
I already did. You need innate knowledge and a proper intellectual framework to properly interpret the flower. Without that framework, the flower is not evidence for anything because there is no
Okay, you have
context in
that. I'm
which,
granting that. So walk me through it.
I
You have
already
the
told
innate
you.
knowledge. Now walk me through it.
That's right. So as knowing my creator innately, I could know more about my creator by looking at what he's created, external to
Right.
myself.
Oh, great. Oh,
Sure.
great. So now you look at the flower. Now you can know more. And
Sure.
here's the inference. Go ahead.
I'm not sure what you mean by inference. When I see, for example, if I know someone and I am equipped with certain intellectual capacities, right? When I observe the world around me, I see things that are fingerprints, so to speak, of the maker that I know. How do I know
Right.
that? Well, by the impossibility of the contrary. If I reject that I could know that, then I undercut my innate knowledge and the necessity of those innate categories to make sense out of the external world. I don't see how that's I mean, one could disagree with what I'm saying, but I don't see how that's difficult to follow. It seems like you're trying to place a wedge between innate knowledge and then how the external world makes sense or is evidence for something. And I
The
just
exact
can't.
opposite. I granted your innate knowledge, and you said you use that as a framework to further evidence the non-innate knowledge,
Right.
the non-innate
So
revelation, and I'm just not hearing anything about what the inference is. How you get from flower to God. I mean, I'm granting innate knowledge as a framework. I'm just not hearing anything.
well, then the inference, then even if I were to fail to give an inference, is irrelevant to the fact that the flower is evidence because you need the innate knowledge as a reality to make sense out of anything. So my lack of ability to explain the inference is irrelevant. The fact that the innate categories are presupposed necessarily already or grant the point that however it's inferenced, God is known right at the outset. He
Right.
must be known to know any flower.
Mr. Ayala, but
That's
you
all I'm
made the
saying.
distinction. You said, like, yeah, we got this innate knowledge and we got the
Right.
non-innate knowledge. I've been
Right.
asking you, I keep asking you about the non-innate knowledge, and
I
no
don't
answer
see.
comes.
Well, I mean, you might not like my answer. That's fine. But I'm saying the innate knowledge is necessary to make sense out of the flower. If you grant the innate knowledge, then cool. You grant the innate knowledge. You grant that in order to know a flower, I must have a knowledge of God. Okay, that's evidence enough. In other words, you can't know a flower for anything. You don't have a proper context without the God I'm saying we innately know. I don't need to give an inference, even if I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're asking. But suppose I understand what you're asking, and I don't know how to give an inference from that and answer your question. It's irrelevant to the fact that God is required to make sense out of any inference I might give.
Well, I was just
Wait,
wondering if you go. Sorry, go.
well, I was just going to
Yeah,
ask, it's not clear to me what you mean by evidence. So can you sort of explicate?
yeah. That's another. Yeah, I guess I should have asked that question. What do you mean by evidence when you say how is the flower evidence for God?
What do you think it's evidence for God?
I would say that it is a data point that requires God to make sense out of. So the very fact that I can make sense out of anything is evidences the God I know innately. So when you say evidence, though, I don't mean evidence purely in like an empirical way. Because if I'm talking about transcendental categories as evidence, they're non-empirical forms of evidence, namely transcendental necessities.
Yeah.
So I can't
So,
talk. So I never talk of evidence independent of transcendental categories because it would be unintelligible.
But so that's not, you haven't told me what you mean by evidence, though. What do you mean by evidence?
I would say that evidence could be a data point that indicates the maker that I have
Something,
innate knowledge
what
of.
does it mean? Okay,
So
yeah, but
design,
you're just,
so a
when you
data point
say it
can give evidence of
indicates,
it.
well, when
You
you
know,
say it indicates, that just seems to be like saying it's evident. What does it mean to indicate?
well, it probably means the same thing you might understand if something indicates another. I'm using it in a very generic
When I
sense.
say something
In other words,
Raises the
indicates,
probability of
what,
in other words, a flower or a complex mechanism or something can indicate a designer. But in my case, the designer is not some abstract kind of idea.
did you just give
It's
an inference? Maybe something we
well,
can work with there.
if that is what you would consider an inference, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm not against giving inferences. I can say that data points in the empirical world, things that we observe, can be inferences of the maker that I know innately.
but I, wait, what's the,
That's what the Bible says. That's what the Bible says. The heavens declare the glory of God.
wait, but what's the inference?
I I guess I don't know what you're asking. If I were to, and we can use kind of the generic example, right? If I were to walk on a beach and I see a watch, right? I could infer from the watch that it's designed.
Based
So,
on like complexity or something like that.
sure, yeah, based on complexity,
But
design, and
I
purpose and
thought,
intention.
I thought originally. I mean, I can kind of see what you're trying to say, but
But by the way,
kind
before
of
you
thought,
continue, that's really all I mean by like, if I'm understanding correctly, right? So when I make an inference, I can infer based upon other categories that I have, categories of design and purpose and teleology and things like that. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, I thought this started off with me saying the Christian God exists because, and now you seem to like making inference that point to a God.
Nope. I'm talking about the Christian God. I don't think the non-Christian God can make intelligible concepts of design. So now, if you're asking for a
Someone,
specific,
I think someone's speaking.
yeah, I do hear someone
Oh, that's
speaking.
hog tie. Jeez. Okay, I gotta.
Did he forget to turn? By the way, I don't know who
Oh
said it.
man.
I don't know who said it, and I want to give kudos. But someone called me Mr. Ayala, and that is the first time in a long time that I've had an interaction with someone, maybe for the first time, and they've actually got my name correctly.
That was
So
Tom.
kudos to whoever said that.
That was me.
Okay, well, kudos to you, man.
Thank you.
My name gets butchered quite a bit, so I appreciate it.
Um.
But yeah, so what I
So
was saying with the watch, for example, I'm not making an argument. If I were to construct that into like a syllogism or something, I'm not making that as an argument for a generic designer. So I would further argue, for example, that the Christian God is required for even categories of design. So that would just be an illustration of that's how I would make an inference. But that's not the inference I make to the Christian God, as the Christian God is kind of a conclusion to an argument. That's just an example of inferring teleology. But as a Christian,
right.
because I have categories, transcendental categories that I use, I have no problem making inferences based upon what I observe to the fact that it's created by my God. But that
And
wouldn't be
you're
a
rendering some
syllogism,
kind of transcendental argument.
right?
X is
I'd make a
necessary for Y,
transcendental.
X therefore Y, something like that.
Yeah, I'd make a transcendental argument because I don't think that, say, for example, if I were to give simply a teleological argument or a moral argument, un, un, without considering broader worldview categories, then those arguments in and of themselves would only demonstrate kind of a generic concept of a God if they're successful. And that I'm not
Well,
arguing for. You
yeah.
just
What
asked
would
me
be the
how I make the inference. So I'm not arguing for the existence of God when I'm answering your question, because I already said that I have innate knowledge of God. I already have a knowledge of God. These data
what would be the
points are.
support for premise one of your transcendental argument?
I'm sorry.
What would be the support for premise one of your transcendental argument?
Sure. I could argue along the lines: if knowledge is possible, then the Christian worldview is true. Knowledge is possible, therefore the Christian worldview is true. So that would be a transcendental argument in a deductive form, in which the first premise is defended transcendentally.
No, I asked you what the support for premise one was, and then you rendered the entire argument.
So the support of it would be that if you deny that first premise, then you would fall into the same categories of skepticism or unintelligibility, and that would have to be demonstrated through the course of conversation. And then I'd also provide a positive argument as to why the Christian God does provide the preconditions for knowledge and intelligible experience.
Wait, but you have to do more than just say through a course of a conversation, right? Because you have to have a general answer to that question. You have to be able to refute it generally, not just, you have to be able to refute it generally, not just depending on, because it could be that Tom has an incoherent worldview or Haiti has an incoherent worldview, but Bob down the street has a coherent atheist worldview, right? So you just have to demonstrate that they're all false without the appeal to anyone specific.
That's incorrect.
What?
That's incorrect.
Well, if you don't, the problem with you saying that that's incorrect is if someone demonstrates a coherent worldview that accounts for everything that you're saying, then what you're saying is possibly false. You want to say that it's not possibly false. So that's why it is correct.
No, that's incorrect, because it presupposes that the transcendental argument can only be demonstrated by an inductive demonstration of the falsity of all competing worldview perspectives, and that's
no,
just
it's not
true.
inductive. You make it deductive, make it abductive. I don't care what you do, but you have to show that all other worldviews are false.
Right, and if you the transcendental argument tries to demonstrate that the Christian worldview provides the necessary preconditions for intelligible experience. Now, here's the thing: if you're asking for, pardon, I had to burp. Excuse me. If you're trying to provide an ultimate context that grounds intelligible experience, I would argue that you can only have one ultimate foundation for that. You can't have a multiplicity of worldviews that equally and sufficiently demonstrate intelligibility, because then you're stuck in a pluralism, which kind of just leads to a form of skepticism. So I would say that if there is one worldview that does in fact ground those things, and you could argue for the fact that it does, then it follows that every other worldview doesn't. Now, if someone disagrees and says, but what about worldview A, B, or C, then we can talk about those and we can do some worldview analysis to further demonstrate the point. But I would not have to demonstrate the falsity of every single one inductively.
It's not inductive. You do it deductively.
Or deductive. Either way.
Yes, you do. You do have to. You have to show that they're false, right? Because you don't believe that believe that contradictions can be true, right? So you don't think that both worldviews can be true. So you have to show that other worldviews are false.
You show that other worldviews are false by demonstrating that Christianity does in fact provide the necessary preconditions for intelligibility. If it does,
but you say
no other worldview can, because you can only have one metaphysical ultimate.
Wait, but hold on. That doesn't.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
That doesn't fall. Let me just.
Can I just really interject really quickly?
Yeah.
But you said that you established that by.
Can I say timeout real quick? I do apologize. Only I'm kind of new to Clubhouse, and I know that things can get a little unwieldy. So if someone wants to make a point, if it can just be one at a time, and then I'll try my best to address.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I've been talking for a long time. I'll just make one more point.
Sure.
And then I'll let Josh talk to you. But keep in mind, I am going to. You have to be nice in order to play with Eli. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. I'm just saying.
Well, I appreciate
so
that.
If that means that you can't be nice people who talk to Eli and you get set down, you were warned. Fair warning. And if you can't handle the increased difficulty level, then I'm sorry. You're just not meant to be playing the game. But Eli, I thought you said that you're establishing that it has to be the Christian God.
Sure.
And you're not ruling out all the other worldviews. But you said that you established the necessity of the Christian God by the impossibility of the contrary, which I take it you're using some sort of Van Tillian sense in which you're doing that, which says that you're showing that they're not possible on their own merit, right?
That's one way you illustrate the impossibility of a particular worldview, but the positive demonstration comes in showing that Christianity can ground intelligible experience and knowledge. So if that's true, if Christianity can successfully show that within that worldview you could have knowledge, intelligibility, it doesn't reduce to an utter skepticism, then it follows it must be the only worldview that can do it, because you can't have more than one.
Because something can, it must be the only one?
In this case, yes. When you're talking about transcendental necessities, yes.
I said I was going
This
to.
isn't even a debatable. This isn't even a debatable point. This is not like something uniquely presuppositional. I mean, you can only have one transcendental. If that's the hypothetical, right? If one could demonstrate the transcendental to be the case, then it must be true. That's just the nature of a transcendental.
Yeah, but we're waiting on the proof.
Wait, I don't understand why.
The proof
Wait, hold on a
comes
second.
in.
I just don't understand why something transcendental can't be contingently true also. That doesn't follow. At least you haven't demonstrated that.
Well, the Christian worldview is the nature of the transcendental worldview is unique in the sense that it's not making um, claims that are based on contingencies. If the Christian worldview is true, I mean, God is, if I can use kind of a pietistic language, God is the Lord over contingencies. There's no contingency or possibility that hangs over him metaphysically. So the nature of the unique claim of the Christian worldview is that it can't be a sort of transcendental that is contingent. It must be necessary given the nature of the Christian God as
But
the greatest, if I can use Anselmian language, the greatest conceivable being.
yeah, but again, that's not addressing the point I made, right? Because the point I made is that whether or not that's true, that might be true, but it just follows then that if God exists, then God is necessary, right? It doesn't follow that God exists, right?
Yeah,
It's
no, it
just
doesn't. Yeah,
sorry,
go
hold
ahead.
on
I'm
a
sorry.
second. I'm
I
not
interrupted
finished
you. I
making my point.
apologize. Yep,
You're
yep,
not,
my fault. Go ahead.
yeah. So the point I was making is for something to be transcendental, all that means is it provides the necessary precondition for something or other, right? On this view. Now, it doesn't follow that because something provides the preconditions for something or other, that therefore that thing is necessary. That just straightforwardly doesn't follow. It's a non sequitur. Now, you might be able to give an argument for that, but I've yet to see such an argument, right? So it could be the case that in one possible world, X provides the necessary preconditions for knowledge and intelligibility and what have you, and in another possible world, Y provides the uh, necessary preconditions for knowledge, intelligibility, and whatever, right? And so that's not going to be sufficient for you to say that the Christian God is the only way. You have to show that the other those other possibilities are in fact impossible. So you have to argue that they're contradictory or something.
Well, you're presupposing that there are possibilities that stand over God. The nature of the Christian claim is that God is the necessary precondition for any hypothetical or contingency in any possible world.
Yeah, but
That's
I'm
what I'm saying.
asking
So,
for the
so
argument for that
if you were to
claim.
say, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I'm asking for the argument for that claim.
Well, the argument is demonstrated in the fact that the Christian worldview, given special and general revelation, the nature of the creator and the created order, and the fact that God has revealed himself, right? We could know God's revelation, and that is demonstrated to be true that in rejecting it, one's worldview is reduced to skepticism or absurdity. Now, the response will be, but wait a minute, you just made the statement. Well, then that's where we have to actually get into the weeds and talk about specific worldviews. Not because I have to demonstrate the falsity of them one by one, but simply for the point to illustrate the transcendental point that I made at the beginning. That's why we get into some of the specifics. We try my best to talk to people from different worldviews to illustrate that transcendental point. That's part of the demonstration. Now, the ultimate demonstration is actually showing, well, if Christianity is true, knowledge is possible, intelligible experience is possible, and if that survives the critiques, the internal worldview critiques and things like that, then that's sufficient. Since you only need one transcendental category, you can't have more than one. So in this unique situation, if Christianity is a transcendental category that provides those, then it follows it has to be the only one because you can only have one. And
I
that's
think
the
I've
nature of
demonstrated.
transcendental argumentation. That's not that'd be true for other forms of transcendental argumentation.
Tom, can we bring Danny up? I'm kind of distracted right now, so can we bring Danny
Yeah.
up? Let him finish this guide. Probably Danny has more time than I do right now.
I don't know if you're familiar. I don't know who's talking. If it was Billy or it wasn't Tom. Are you guys familiar with Dr. James Anderson at Reformed Theological Seminary?
I've read his paper.
Yeah, we're familiar with them.
Did you read the one? Oh, geez, what's the name of it?
You're talking about the
It's
Lord of non-contradiction.
I don't know if it was the Lord of non-contradiction. I think it was Logic, Therefore God. And I'm not talking about the entirety of the paper. There's a section in the paper where he actually has it's a fairly long deductive argument, but I like it. And I mean, I wouldn't have time to unpack it now, but it's definitely an interesting deductive argument for the Trinitarian God along like these transcendental lines that I'm talking about. So if you take a look at that paper, I think it's called Logic, Therefore God, you might kind of get a better grip as to at least
Yeah,
the
we see the
direction.
problem is that establishing a Trinitarian God by some kind of a priori argument wouldn't establish that Christianity is true. And that's really the burden here, right? You need to give an argument that doesn't merely establish that Trinitarianism is true, but that Christianity is true.
Well, the nature of the presuppositional argument is we're not necessarily arguing for a simple data point, i.e., the existence of a triune God. The very concept of the triune God is unintelligible apart from a broader worldview context. So the nature of the argument is at the worldview level. It's not at the, slice this abstract category Trinitarian God and argue just on that basis. We're arguing for a worldview system.
Yeah, you keep saying you're arguing for it, but nobody's seen the argument.
Okay.
Yeah, so we just want an argument that establishes that in order for intelligibility or knowledge or whatever to be possible, right, Christianity has to be true, right?
Okay, well, that was the deductive argument. That was the deductive argument I gave.
Yeah, but the problem is that you didn't give a reason for anybody to accept the first premise of your argument.
I did give a reason, and then I said
what was the reason?
In rejecting it, a person's worldview is reduced to absurdity, and they don't have a grounding for knowledge.
That's just the claim. That's just the claim that we're.
No.
That's just the claim that we're skeptical of, that we want you to establish. So what's the argument that establishes that?
The part of the way it's established is the other.
No, I just want the argument.
Well, that's part of the argument. So for example, you have to understand what the nature of transcendentals
No, actually, I just want the argument. Just give me the argument in premise, conclusion form.
No, because I'm now giving you an answer to my first premise that you're disagreeing with. The answer is, okay,
I didn't ask a question.
Okay. All right.
I just asked for an argument. Is there an argument that establishes that claim is true?
I'm not going to have this sort of conversation. All right. I'm telling you, when I'm defending the first premise as a transcendental premise, okay, if you disagree with the premise, which is what you're supposed to do, if you disagree with the deductive argument, right? When you disagree with the first premise, which is the transcendental premise, you are saying then that Christianity is not the necessary preconditions for knowledge. Okay. Now, how that's demonstrated is you now need to show me, it's part of my argument, give me your worldview, and I will demonstrate that given the truth of your worldview, it undermines its own categories. That's the nature.
Yeah, but then you're doing the impossibility of the contrary by showing that a worldview is not true because there's some kind of contradiction on its own grounds. But when I asked you about that, that's what you said you weren't doing. You were saying that you were showing that the other views the other views that are possible are impossible due to the Christian view being necessary. So which is
Yes. No, it's both. That's why I said it's a two-step approach.
Okay, well, if it's both, then you can give the argument why the Christian God and only the Christian God is the necessary precondition. Go ahead. Okay.
So now when I give my reasoning for that, you're going to disagree, and part of that disagreement is part of the argument. In your disagreement, you're going to have to give a competing worldview system in which I can give an illustration as to why the point of my argument stands. So it's not just me standing here talking. It's what the transcendental discussions are worldview analyses. We have to analyze worldviews. It's not just what I'm arguing here.
Go ahead and give it.
Yeah, well, I already did. I gave my premises.
What?
You disagreed with the first premise. So now I'm saying, fine, give me a worldview that grounds intelligible experience and knowledge.
But is there anything in our background beliefs that would?
That's literally how the first premise is defended. It welcomes competitors to demonstrate that this claim is actually false.
Then it seems like you would agree with us.
Because of the nature of transcendental arguments, they are indirect arguments. They're indirect arguments. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted.
So then it seems like you would agree with us that there's nothing that we are committed, there's nothing that we believe that would commit us to that premise.
Well, you don't have to commit yourself to that premise, but part of the engagement with the argument is to actually present a worldview that grounds intelligible experience, and by doing so, you falsify the transcendental premise.
Yeah, so there's two sides of this. They either that I reject the premise and then offer an alternative,
yes,
or there's something that you would say that I believe that would rationally commit me to the premise, and it seems like you agree with us that there's nothing that.
Can you repeat that again? I'm trying to follow. I don't know if I follow your line of reasoning there. Can you repeat that again, or maybe expand on what you just said?
Yeah, so it seems like the dialectic shifts to either me giving you my view, and then I can be right or wrong about that, and that's what Josh kind of highlighted. Just because I might give you an incoherent position doesn't mean that all things that are non-Christian worldviews are.
That's correct.
False. There's that direction, but then there's the other direction that there's a question about whether you and I agree that whether there's anything I believe that would commit me to that premise in question. Seems like you agree with us then that there's nothing that you can offer to support the premise or that such that we would be committed to the truth of that premise.
Well, again, when you're talking about committed to the truth of that premise, that's going to be very subjective. I mean, there are people who aren't committed to all sorts of premises that are perfectly valid and true.
Yeah, but I guess the question is, when we ask for the argument of that premise, what we're asking for is there any line of reasoning that you could give us such that we would be committed to the truth of that premise? And it seems like you're suggesting that you don't have such a thing.
Well, I mean, okay, so the nature of transcendental arguments, we can take, for example, an item in which we agree and ask what the necessary preconditions for that item is. And that's precisely what the nature of the argument does. It's asking, for example, if I were to say X is the item we agree on, then we ask what are the necessary preconditions for X. I think that's fair. So
I think we're talking about a different premise. You said that the premise when question was that to reject the initial argument, initial premises of the argument, our worldview amounts to absurdity, and that's what we're skeptical of. And it seems like you're saying that you don't have any line of reasoning to provide as to commit us to the truth of that premise.
Well, my invitation is to demonstrate that premise is wrong, because that's the way
that's
it's
shifting
illustrated.
the burden.
So
that's not shifting the burden.
It's not shifting the burden of proof for the reason
we're just
that,
asking you whether there's an argument that supports the claim or not. That's just a yes or no question.
No, it's not a yes or no question, because the nature of transcendental arguments is indirect. Now, I told you that if God exists and he reveals himself, he can reveal himself such that we can have a knowledge of his existence through general and special revelation. Okay. We have coherence. We have a worldview context in which individual data points have coherence as they reflect God's creation, his purpose, his intentions for facts and the meaningfulness of facts.
Is that an inference?
Within the Christian worldview, that makes sense out of knowledge.
Yeah, but is it an inference? That's what I'm just trying to get clear on. Is that an inference in support of the claim?
That is my claim. That is the nature of my claim.
I'm not asking about the claim. I'm asking if there's an inference that supports it.
Yes. Well, the thing that I'm inferring is the transcendental necessity of the point I'm making, which, again, is why I'm asking. If you disagree with that point, I'm asking then why doesn't someone present a worldview that actually combats my first premise? That's the way I'm defending my first premise. The point of my argument is to show, yes, give a competitor and we can talk about worldview analysis.
Yeah, okay, but
that's
so
one
just
of the ways
to be clear, is that there is an inference in support of the claim?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, see, I've asked that question multiple times now. And
I'm trying to understand.
If you didn't understand what I meant, why did you go through that detour rather than just say, I don't know what you mean? Do you understand what an inference is?
Well, if you're saying that I'm coming to a conclusion based on a data point, if that's what you mean by inference, then I guess I think I know what you're talking about. I'm trying my best to kind of understand. I know these words could be ambiguous unless they're clearly defined. If you're saying an inference that you can look at something and then infer or draw a conclusion based upon what I'm observing, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking then.
Yeah, so it's some kind of rule-governed process from a set of premises to a conclusion, right?
Okay.
By some kind of inference rule, let's say, something like that.
Okay, so if I say that the Christian worldview provides the necessary preconditions for knowledge, and then I say there's a God, he's revealed himself, the worldview that I'm espousing gives context and meaningfulness to knowledge because data points, okay, like facts, only have meaning as they relate to other facts. So there needs to be a system, a philosophy of fact that undergirds the intelligibility of interpreting data points. Christianity provides that. And so not only must I presuppose that to make sense out of what I just said, I could also infer that fact given that because a fact is intelligible, there must be a system of facts that makes it intelligible. And I'm arguing that that's the Christian worldview.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get clear on whether there's an inference that supports the claim that to reject the Christian worldview, one could not have intelligibility.
Because that's the nature of a transcendental, right? If it's by the impossibility of the contrary, it's an indirect proof. So a direct proof would be something like, and I guess in giving a deductive argument, that's a form of direct proof, but indirect proofs don't typically get presented in deductive arguments. The only reason why I gave a direct argument is so that people can kind of see the line of reasoning I'm trying to follow. But transcendental arguments are typically indirect. They're proven by the impossibility of the contrary. So it's not inferred in the exact same way you might infer some other fact, because the fact of God is not the same as the fact of any other fact. It's unique in its transcendental necessity.
So is it a yes or a no?
I mean, I don't know how to answer your question if I just explain I think I explained myself the best.
I'm just asking whether there's an inference or not. I've asked that now probably about 6 or 7 times.
And I'm saying that the Christian God is necessary for the intelligibility of inferences.
Yeah, that's the claim. That's the claim that I'm asking if there's an inference in support of. Is there one?
I don't know what you're asking then. I do apologize.
You don't. So you don't. So okay. So you didn't understand when I tried to explain what an inference was. You didn't understand.
I thought I did, but I guess I don't. So I do apologize.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. If you don't even understand what an inference is, then I'm just not really sure how the discussion can proceed, right? Because that's what we're interested in, right? You've made a claim. And we're looking for a justification for the claim. And I think the people here are only going to accept an inference as a justification, right? We're not going to accept an appeal to an intuition or something like that, right? So if you don't actually know what an inference is, it's not going to be, we're not going to see how your claim is justified, right, if you don't know how to provide an inference for it.
Okay, well, when you say inference, I'm reading the definition here, and maybe you can help me. Would you agree with this definition of an inference? Am I still on? The sound went off. Huh?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought. So I'm going to read this definition of an inference, and then maybe you guys can tell me if that's what you mean. Okay, is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so an inference, a conclusion reached on the basis of evidence and reasoning. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I want something a little bit more specific than that, right? I basically want a deductive argument because I don't think you're making a claim that could be supported inductively or abductively, right? Because you're claiming that all other worldviews necessarily would be self-contradictory or something like that, right?
Well, so, I'm saying you only have one transcendental. So if one is true, if one perspective is true, then all the other ones must be false.
Yeah, so what I'm interested in is in a deductive argument, right? And so basically what I want are a set of premises that entail a conclusion by some set of inference rules, right? But if you don't actually know what those things are, right? If you don't understand what a deductive argument is, what an inference rule is,
right?
No, that's not the argument in question.
Okay.
I was asking whether there was a deductive argument that establishes the claim that if one were to reject the Christian God, right, one could not have intelligibility or what
So can I repeat something back to you, and you let me know if that's what you mean, and then I can, because again, if you're asking for a deductive argument, so for example, I gave a deductive argument. Are you asking for a deductive defense of the first premise?
That's right.
Ah, okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, that would have made sense if someone said it that simply. So I do apologize if that was confusing. I suppose I don't know how to put it in deductive form at this very moment, but I know it has been put, and I have put it in deductive form somewhere. So that's a good point. Now that I understand what you mean, I can go back and try to formulate it, and next time I hop in the room, I could share it. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. But see, the thing is, we're not going to be interested in a question-begging argument. So
that wasn't question. That's not a question-begging argument. There's nothing that said that was question-begging. Absolutely not.
No, I didn't say there's anything you said that was question-begging. I said we're not going to be interested in a question-begging argument.
Of course,
right?
Yeah, no one's.
So if you formulate a deductive argument, it's only going to be of interest to us, right? If we accept the premises in the argument,
of course,
or if you can show us why we need to accept the premises in the argument, right?
Yeah, that's fine. Of course, yeah. No one's talking about fallaciously question-begging.
But see, the thing is, plenty of people here have been familiar with presuppositionalist argumentation for a long time, and I'm talking about over 10 years.
Sure.
And we're not aware of there being any such non-question begging argument in the literature. Right?
Well, I don't know of any question-begging argument in the literature. I don't know what you're referring to. Transcendental arguments are not uniquely.
You seem to think there isn't a non-question begging argument that establishes the truth of the Christian worldview that's in the philosophical literature, right? And I just don't know where it is, because there are people who've gone through Van Til's writings and Greg Bonson's writings and so on, and they've never been able to find that argument. But you sound like you're very confident that the argument exists somewhere. Right?
There is no in the literature. There is no presuppositional argument in deductive form that's question-begging. Absolutely not.
Yeah, no, I didn't ask you that. I asked you where the argument is that establishes this, because you said you formulated it somewhere and it exists elsewhere. Form, yeah. So I'm just asking, where in the literature is it? Presumably it's in Van Til or Bonson somewhere. I would
say the argument is summarized in Van Til. A lot of people who don't understand, a little bit that's confusing about Van Til is he comes from a continental philosophical tradition in which they're not known for formulating strict deductive arguments. That comes more in the analytic tradition. So that's why you have the difference between Van Til. It can be a little confusing if people don't know that tradition. And then you have someone like Bonson and James Anderson who's more analytical. So you'll probably see
James Anderson is not a presuppositionalist. Yes, so that's not going to help. No, he isn't
a presuppositionalist.
No,
I know him personally. Okay. Well, I know him personally. I know he is a presuppositionalist.
But in any case, James Anderson doesn't have an argument that we don't have a good basis to.
Okay. Well,
right. I would. But so where in Bonson is this argument?
One second. Hold up. Time out. Okay, you made a claim there. James Anderson has published peer-reviewed material on transcendental arguments. I have no idea what you're talking about. That's just clearly false.
No, I'm not saying he doesn't have arguments. He has arguments.
And they're not question-begging.
I'm just saying. I didn't say they were question-begging. I'm just saying we're familiar with his arguments and we have good grounds to reject them, right? So I think the argument that you want is going to be something stronger than anything James Anderson has to offer. So presumably Bonson has that, right? Has that argument somewhere?
Well, I'm saying that, no, I'm saying, because Bonson doesn't usually lay out things in deductive form, at least in his writings. It's probably more in his lectures, but it really depends. But it's irrelevant. The points, the main contours of presuppositionalism can be placed in a deductive argument.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, where has it been done? By what scholar? In what text?
Well, James Anderson has put transcendental arguments in deductive form. Now, if you have a basis for rejecting them, that's fine. But to say that they don't exist anywhere,
I wasn't denying that James Anderson had arguments, right? I was just asking where the argument is that you have in mind, right? So in other words, the formalization of Van Til's argument.
Well, there are many formulations of Van Til's argument in John Frame and James Anderson.
Yeah, so where does Frame give the argument in support of the premise that I challenge?
I mean, I don't
in
have
deductive
the reference.
form.
I don't have the reference in front of me right now, but if you take a look at
how long
apologetics,
would it take you to find it?
One second. Well, it's not my job to find it. You're asking me to find a reference. I'm not going to run and grab a reference everywhere you ask, but because it's really irrelevant to me. All you need are the basic principles of presuppositionalism, and one could formulate them into a deductive argument if they wish. Now, whether they're able to defend the argument, that's another point. But the fact that they're in deductive form and someone can place them in deductive form, I'm unaware of a deductive presuppositional argument that is question begging. Now, if that's not what you're saying, that's fine, but it's kind of confusing. Some of the statements you're making, I think.
I'm saying that we don't know of any place that the support for the first premise, right, appears in non-question begging form in any presuppositionalist literature.
Do you know
that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist somewhere. Maybe it does, right? And we just haven't found it yet.
Yeah.
People we know have, gone through Van Til's and Bonson's writings looking for that argument, and they haven't been able to find it. So I'm just asking you where it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to look through references and things like that.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, just let us know when you find it.
Sure. And I do have a question, though. So you said that you don't know of any non-question begging presuppositional arguments in deductive form. Are you saying, though, that you only know, and you can say that that's not what you're saying, but are you saying that you only know of presuppositional arguments in deductive form that are question begging? Is that what you're saying? Or is that not
That's right, yeah.
So that's funny. So I'm not.
Now that you're here, Detroiter, can you comment on whether James Anderson is a presuppositionalist or not?
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question real quick, though? Can you give me a reference, if you have a reference, if you have something specific in mind, then it's okay if you don't, where a presuppositional argument by a noted presuppositionalist is given in deductive form and is question begging in one of its premises?
When you say noted presuppositionalist, what do you mean by that?
Okay, someone like a James Anderson, John Frame, Greg Bonson, Tom Notaro, any person who is considered quote unquote a leading presuppositional thinker who's written on the subject. Because I would be interested in if you can find a deductive argument with a question begging premise, that would interest me, because I do study these issues and I try to take note of those things. And it's okay if you don't know a reference.
Well, what's question begging is when they say due to the impossibility of the contrary, right? Which we have no reason to reject. Yeah. We have no reason to accept, right? Only somebody who already agreed with the argument would accept that.
Yeah, can I say a couple of things quick?
Would you say?
Yeah, go ahead, Detroiter.
Would you say that all transcendental arguments are question begging?
No.
Okay, so then what you just said makes no sense, because in its form, there is nothing different about a Van Tillian transcendental argument and any other transcendental argument. The form, there's no difference.
Question begging has nothing to do with form, though.
Yeah, that's
I'm talking about the nature of the claim. So if you were to take, for example, a transcendental argument, you say, Y is the necessary precondition for X, right? X.
That's not a transcendental argument.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, Detroit, go ahead and say what you were going to say.
Well, I was going to say something about John Frame, but he's sort of a presuppositionalist in the sense that he thinks that God is a necessary precondition for these
James
things.
Anderson, you mean?
James Anderson. He doesn't, as far as I know, he doesn't really, I wouldn't characterize his arguments as presuppositionalist arguments from what I've read of him. But he is a presuppositionalist in the first sense, in the sense that he thinks that God is a necessary, whatever. Yeah. I just want to say
he would categorize himself James Anderson categorizes himself as being somewhere between Greg Bonson and John Frame. So there are some differences. It really depends what one is going to say is a quote unquote genuine presuppositionalist.
I thought it was Ben Frame.
Right.
Ben?
No, it's John Frame.
No, it's John Frame.
I don't know if that's a joke or... Anyway, just quickly on what the... Because here's the sort of inference that we'd be looking for, that I would be looking for, right? You say that
and by the way,
have some data.
I'm going to interrupt you real quick. If you can speak slowly, I'm going to jot this down because I'm very much interested in making sure that if I'm saying something unclear, these kind of conversations actually help me clarify. And if there's something like a weakness on how I'm presenting it, I want to know that. So I do appreciate you guys pointing these out. So let me just, okay, so inference.
So
okay, go ahead.
I don't think the word transcendental is actually very appropriate here, so I'm just going to not use that. Here's a general form of the argument you're trying to make, which is what you just said a few seconds ago. Right? There's some data or some fact that we presumably agree to, X. Right? In this case, it could be that we have knowledge or that there's intelligibility, however we want to think exactly about that. And then you say, Y is the necessary precondition for X, or is at least a necessary precondition for X, where Y in your case is something like Christian theism, whatever exactly, something like that. At the very least, the existence of some God. And when I understand necessary precondition, that suggests to me that there's some strict logical entailment from the one to the latter. In other words, X entails Y. Necessarily, if X, then Y.
Okay.
Right? And what else does it mean for it to be a necessary precondition? You can't have one without the second, right? And if I'm looking for support for this conditional premise, this X is or Y is a necessary precondition for X, I'm going to look for a logical inference from the fact that X to the fact that Y. Right? So I'm going to have some inference, some chain of reasoning that starts with X and concludes with Y. If you could show that, just draw it out, to some like logical proof, then you would demonstrate it.
Okay, so can I make sure if I'm following you? So if we say if we say Y is the necessary precondition for X, like so if X is some data point like knowledge or logic or something like that, you're looking for the inference that
it should be logically impossible to have X without Y, right?
Okay. Yes. Okay. And so, all right. I see. I think I know what you're talking about when you say inference. So you want a line of reasoning to show that Y, for example, is in fact the necessary precondition for X.
Yes, and importantly, the logical inference you can't be using other non-logical premises in your inference, because otherwise it wouldn't show that this is a logically necessary fact. So in other words, you have to start from this first premise, the certain claims characteristic of Christian theism, whatever. You could separate that into multiple premises if you want. Okay. And from that statement or set of statements, just applying standard rules of logic, inference rules of logic, you conclude, therefore, if we just go the other way, from the fact that we have knowledge or whatever, you can derive the characteristic claims of Christianity.
So would okay, so getting back to what, I forgot who I was talking to before. So would having a deductive argument in defense of the transcendental premise of my previous deductive argument, would that be helpful in seeing the line of connection? So for example, if I were to say, if knowledge is possible, the Christian worldview is true, and you're going to say, well, wait a minute, defend that. Would a secondary deductive argument in defense of the first premise help see the line of reasoning? Is that what you're saying?
It's not just that it would help it, right? It's the point. The point is that the first premise, as I understand it, requires that there is such a chain of inference, or that you could in principle make, right? It's saying that there is this logical connection between these two things. It's necessary, logically speaking. So that means there is some logical connection between them. And for people like myself who don't accept that, there's a logical connection of that sort. Okay. Showing the connection is going to help me, right? If we don't have some reason to suspect that there is a connection like that, I don't see what the point in engaging this sort of argument is.
Okay, I got you. Well, thank you. That's helpful. I'm going to go back to the drawing board and see if I can construct deductive connections. Because a lot of my conversations that I have are pretty informal. So it's not that I'm laying out premises and things like that. So that would definitely be helpful. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, let me be clear. I'm fine with having the informal discussions. For example, in the sense that I'm fine with talking about the various commitments that I make on my view and what we mean by knowledge and whether I think we have knowledge in the way that you define it and so on.
Sure.
You're probably not going to like many things that I have to say about that, but whatever. Those are things I'm going to say.
That's just the nature of disagreements.
Yeah,
but that's true. I have no problem with the informal, but when we're talking about stuff like this, I suppose it requires us to be more specific. So having formal formulations of this would be helpful. And so to that end, I would agree. That's something I would benefit from going back and formulating and perhaps presenting something like that, in the future to be more precise. Because I know you guys are looking for specifics since we're making kind of grandiose claims as Christians. I get that.
Well, there's two issues that come up though with the informal discussion that we might have, which is that the discussion might be fine on its own, but with respect to this transcendental argument, whatever, there's two issues. One, even if you're able to show that there's some contradiction in my view, or even like, I don't know, it's a contradicting kind of central in some of my commitments or something like that. That's going to do very little to demonstrate your claim that all non-Christian worldviews are contradictory, or that Christian theism is a necessary precondition for these data. It would just show that my view is wrong. But okay, that's not doing very much.
Yeah, the transcendental claim is not simply because your worldview can't account for something that automatically ipso facto makes the Christian worldview true. That's not the.
But then why is that the conversation that always ensues, right?
Because that's what illustrates the point. So it's.
But it doesn't. My point is that it doesn't illustrate it.
Oh, okay.
Right. All you're able to show is that this one view has some contradiction in it. That does little and if nothing to show your overall claim. It's not an illustration at all.
Okay. All right.
So in other words, you have to, what your claim would have to do is rule out not just my view, but any other worldview that doesn't make precisely the commitments you think characterize Christian theism, or whatever is the necessary precondition for
so what you seem to be saying then so then what you seem to be saying is that the only way to prove my argument is that I inductively demonstrate the falsity of other competing views, which just completely misunderstands the nature of a transcendental argument. Transcendental arguments are not required to do that by the very nature of transcendentals. That's what I'm saying. So you're right that demonstrating the falsity of your view doesn't automatically prove my view, but what automatically proves my view is the positive case that given the Christian worldview, we can have intelligible experience.
That doesn't demonstrate it either.
Yes, because you can only have one transcendental, unless you're going to argue that there can be multiple transcendentals that provide the necessary preconditions, which doesn't work.
But that's different though, right? It's one thing to say that on Christian theism there can be knowledge and intelligibility, and another thing to say that Christian theism is a necessary precondition for knowledge and intelligibility. I'm saying that demonstrating the former does little if nothing to demonstrate the latter. There could be all sorts of views that are consistent with there being knowledge and intelligibility.
No, that's the nature of the claim, and so that's where we say, hey, well, part of this argument is the engagement with our premise. Like, give me an example, and then we can interact with it, right? If someone says, well, I don't want to give an example, you have to prove your point. Well, I can give an argument, but I mean, you're not going to agree with the argument. You have to give illustrations where we can actually give evidence. If I can use that example, falsifying one worldview is a data point in favor of the transcendental argument, which is demonstrated on its own basis.
It's of negligible support, right? In fact, I would say it's you can measure zero. It's like nothing, right? It's like there's nothing to demonstrate your claim. So, but you're wrong, right? And here's why, right? So if the claim is that all other views are inconsistent with there being knowledge and intelligibility, or whatever you think the data is, and if you can show that this one view, or whatever view I'm able to present to you, doesn't accord with the data, is not consistent with the data,
Sure.
then that's true. We could rule out some views as being possibly true.
Yes.
But that's not showing that all other views, apart from the one that you affirm,
I agree.
are such.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I don't think you're understanding the basis for
Right.
the truth of the transcendental argument is not the falsification of a particular non-Christian worldview. It's not what I was saying.
But then what is the basis then?
Okay, well, I'll repeat it again. It is the positive case that given the truth of Christian theism, knowledge and intelligibility is possible given Christian theism.
But hang on.
If that's true, given the nature of transcendentals, there can only be one view.
Yeah,
now, of course,
right. So
now, of course, we can tickle the person. Well, 1 second. We can tickle the person's curiosity, but what about this view? Then at that point, we're just giving various illustrations. The illustrations don't demonstrate the point of what my positive case was. It's reinforcing that positive case.
Yeah. So like the initial case I took you be saying was that, if I can show that on Christian theism there can be knowledge intelligibility, of course, I think you would agree that that would be insufficient, except in light of the additional fact that there can be only one view that is consistent with there being knowledge and intelligibility. But that's just making just like burying the fact, the burden in that further claim.
That's the nature of the Christian system. So when I say the Christian worldview, I'm saying that given the nature of the case, you can't have more than one transcendental unless you affirm that you can. If you affirm that
but then that's the further claim that I'm not going to accept. And so then I'd be looking for some inference for why, if there is any view which can accommodate knowledge and intelligibility, there can be no others.
So are you of the view then, and this will helpful to me, are you of the view that there can be multiple transcendental categories that sufficiently ground intelligible experience so that
I don't know what a transcendental category is.
Logic, intelligible experience, knowledge.
I'm not sure why. I know the things you're talking about. I'm not sure why I would call those transcendental categories. What about them?
Okay. Well, then how do you understand those? See, this is why
I'd go through them one by one. I could explain. It would take a few minutes.
Well, yes, that's fine. But I'm just saying this is why we talk about worldviews, because now we're going to be talking about these categories independent of broader worldview context. That's why I was talking about the importance of worldviews at the beginning of the discussion. That's why I said that. That's why in Transcendental, this is why when you have these conversations, as you guys know, the presuppositionalist, whether they're annoying about it or not, and I grant you that presuppositionalists could be really annoying, there is often talk about laying out the worldview. And what I do see is the Christian laying out their worldview, and there's disagreement there, of course, that's the nature of the debate, but a lot of people don't show their hand and their worldview so that it can't be critiqued, so that some of those illustrations, those data points that support our transcendental claim can be shown. You see what I'm saying?
They don't. But the point is that I don't know if I should repeat myself here. The data points do not support it.
Right. Well, you say that they don't because
I can explain why they don't.
We actually disagree. Yeah. So
it's quite trivial why they don't, right? Like, look, if I have a bag of infinitely many marbles, right, and you say at least one of the marbles is red, right? I pull out another marble, and I say at least one of the marbles is. This is a bad example. The point is,
you can start again if you need to reset and explain.
You want to say
if you both pick out a marble and you don't open your hand, Eli, and you say open your hand and we'll see if you have the red one, and then Detroit doesn't have the red one, and then you say aha, therefore I have the red one.
That's not exactly what the analogy that I'm looking for.
Well, that's pretty good though.
No, I know it isn't, but I'm trying to explain why showing that one worldview is incompatible with the data does not demonstrate your claim, and in fact does little if nothing to actually demonstrate your claim.
So how about this? And this will be helpful, because what I like to do on my channel is I like to the best of my ability, and I suppose I'm not the best at doing it, but to clarify various misunderstandings of presuppositionalism. So if you think that your analogy with the marbles are
let me give you a better analogy with the marbles.
Okay, but here's what I want you to do, because I do have to leave in 30 seconds, and I don't know. I mean, I'm new to Clubhouse, so I'm not sure if you're able to do this, but if you can jot down your analogy through text, I'll take a look at it and talk to some friends of mine who can think logically through these things. And we'll see if we can come up with an adequate response to it. Because I want to treat your side fairly, and I want to make sure I'm properly representing where you're coming from. And I also want to be able to sharpen my ability to defend my view. So I would appreciate that after we're done here, if you can private message me just a brief little outline of the point you're trying to make, and I'll try my best to address it, maybe in a future video or something like that.
Okay, I'll just say it very shortly here.
Okay.
Suppose you have a red marble, and you say all the other marbles are red as well. That's saying all the other marbles are red is the analog to saying that all other worldviews are incoherent or something like that. And suppose we pull out a marble and see that it's red.
Okay.
Well, okay, in a sense that's consistent with your claim, but there's like infinitely many, or at least a great number of other marbles in there. And showing one of them is red, there's little, if anything, to show that they're all red.
Okay, so if you could jot that down, I do got to get going, but if you could jot that down, I will be sure to look at that, and I'll come up with a response as best I can, and maybe address it in a future video. I can't guarantee me being able to address it the next time I pop on here, because as I said at the beginning, when I pop on here, it's pretty random, and it's not like I have stuff in front of me to make sure I'm careful with how I formulate these things, and I know how that stuff goes. But if you have that point, you think that's a strong point, I don't mind looking at it and thinking about it honestly, and hopefully coming up with a response that might be hopefully satisfactory.
How do we find your channel?
That's fine. But again, the most important thing is the first thing that I talked about how, given the nature of the claim that you're making, this inference from if X, then necessarily Y, you should be able to draw some logical inference from the fact that there's some data, either be it knowledge or intelligibility, to the fact via some set of purely logical inferences that the claims characteristic of Christian theism are true. And that's, you can give either the direct inference or some reason to think that there is going to be a true inference of that sort, because that's required by the claim.
Okay. All right, that's fair. Yeah. I'll think about that. Again, I'm not a professional philosopher by any means, so sometimes I can get lost in some of the terminology, but I think I know what you're saying. But if you were to share that in a text, I'll try my best to read through it and reflect upon it and address it on my channel.
How do we find your channel?
Yeah, my channel's on YouTube. It's called Revealed Apologetics.
Revealed Apologetics.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I hear you ask Darth about this and he just says, "Oh, don't listen to them, they're sophists," and you buy that, the next time I come across you, I'm going to let you know about it.
Well, I don't let anyone control.
You let Darth make you go soft, Eli.
Well, Darth is, I pop in, I listen. No one makes me be anything. I'm kind of my own guy, so I don't let whether atheist or whatever dictate what I say. So.
Oh, just quickly for Ninja in the back channel. Yeah, for the analogy to be more analogous, I should have made the colors different. So his should have been like blue, and saying that all the other ones are red. But this is the same point,
Okay, all right.
Where blue is analogy to like true or can accommodate these things, and red is analogous to cannot.
Okay. Well, I'll consider that, man. I do appreciate it. And so I have to get going, but I have to say, out of all the atheist or agnostic, I don't know what everyone is, of all the rooms that I've been in which I'm most likely the only Christian, this has been the most respectable interaction that I've had. And so I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, no problem.
All right.
You've been one of the better. You've been one of the better subs, to be honest. Although that's not a very high bar.
We want to talk to you again, though. We want to hear that non-question begging argument that you're going to go find. So please return to that.
Yep, I'll try my best. I'll get back to
please.
As I'm able to. All right.
Please come back.
Take care, gentlemen.